Simon, so much to get through between now and then. This is a story that doesn't go away. There is still a lot of anxiety and concern after what happened in the 2022 Champions League final in Paris. If you cast your mind back to that, the two teams on show that day, Liverpool and Real Madrid, thousands of fans at the match at the Stade de France suffered a failed safety management operation, hours of static queues, dangerous policing, and some of the fans, as they were hanging around the Stade de France area, were actually attacked by local thugs. I mean, it really was the Wild West that night, and a review panel appointed by UEFA to inquire into the disaster made 21 recommendations for future improvement. It was an absolute mess from top to bottom. But the Labour MP for Liverpool and West Derby, Ian Byrne, is still not letting this go, because Ian is still saying those at the top of UEFA should still pay for what happened on that night. Ian joins us live. Ian, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jim. Good morning, Simon.
Morning. Ian, am I right? If I cast my mind back, you and I have spoken before on this show. You were there, right? You were there. You're a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Liverpool season ticket holder, yeah. I was there, yeah.
Yeah. Before we go into what you're after now regards Ceferin and one of his sidekicks, Željko Pavlica, who is UEFA's head of safety and security, give us a flavour, briefly, albeit briefly, of your recollections of that night.
Well, you talked about getting attacked by local thugs. We got attacked by the local police as well, Jim. Tear gas, children tear gas, disabled fans tear gas. It was a complete and utter disaster of an operation from both the French security, the police, and UEFA. And it was only the Liverpool fans actually stopped it becoming potentially a bigger disaster than Hillsborough, with that many lives that could have been lost. So that sort of encapsulates what happened that night and why we're still so angry about it now.
Okay, so the latest chapter in this story, am I right, is that you have written to the FA. What have you said and what do you want?
So in light of David Conn's article, the fantastic journalist from The Guardian who does so much to uncover injustices in football, what we've actually seen is that the head of security, Pavlica, who was actually put there by Ceferin, he's a long-term friend, totally unfit for the job, was actually in the VIP room till 8:45 when, for hours outside, as I said, he was seen which could have led to deaths. That was the man who was responsible ultimately for overlooking security. And he was a complete dereliction of duty. He wasn't anywhere to be seen. So obviously, we pushed for him to have some accountability and Ceferin to actually, who took that decision to put him in place, which potentially, Jim, that could have cost hundreds of lives. I genuinely feel that this scandal, because it is a scandal that he was put in position, and the cronyism in UEFA is equal to what we see with FIFA. And it just, and what we've asked for within the letter to the FA is the FA, as a part of the Confederation of UEFA, should be pushing for huge accountability from Ceferin, and also to ensure that the former head of security shouldn't be anywhere near UEFA, and
right,
obviously so that's what we're asking for.
What you're saying, amongst other things, is that Željko Pavlica, UEFA's head of safety and security, while it was all kicking off in and around the stadium, he was sitting in the VIP suite doing next to nothing about it. You're saying that Ceferin should be considering his own position. You're saying that Pavlica should be considering their own position. You want them both out. That's the short and the tall of it, Ian, right?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, the buck stops with them. Jim, the parallels with Hillsborough are absolutely uncanny. They're uncanny. What we're seeing with the dereliction of duty, then the smears and the lies against Liverpool fans to cover up their own culpability. Within David Conn's article, we've actually got evidence between heads of departments within UEFA basically getting told to cover up for Pavlica's, failures. And for me, that goes to the heart of it. How can UEFA change if it's trying to cover up the culpability of individuals that weren't fit for purpose, that could have led to hundreds of people dying at a football match again? And then what they did to make it worse was try and use the Hillsborough playbook of smears, lies, to obviously tarnish the Liverpool supporters, which thankfully has been ripped down. When we've won, I think we've won that battle to acknowledge where the.
I don't think that's what they. I don't think they were using the Hillsborough playbook. I think they were looking at self-preservation. Ian, when you look at this situation,
Simon, just on that, how were they using the Hillsborough playbook? Because
I don't suppose that they were looking at the tragedy of Hillsborough and seeing it as an opportunity to smear Liverpool fans. I think they were probably more in self-preservation mode and probably more about trying to move themselves out of the way.
They used the same playbook, Simon. It was absolutely true.
Yeah, I know, but I don't agree with you, Ian. I understand the history.
Simon, is he not right to the extent that the finger was pointed by some of the authorities at some of the Liverpool fans who were totally blameless on the night?
You're missing my point. I absolutely understand that. But the indexing of it back to Hillsborough, as if it was somebody looking at Hillsborough saying, well, look what they did over here, we can do the same thing, I think is a reach. I think absolutely the outcome of suggesting that, in fact, it was the fans, and Liverpool fans specifically, that were the problem, is not right, and I think it's more to do with their trying to find a self-preservation rather than looking back at a tragedy and using that as a playbook, because it hasn't played out very well, because that playbook has shown people to be culpable and ultimately accountable for what happens. So that's not a playbook that anyone would want to replicate. But I go on to the next part of the question is, do you understand the process of when UEFA commission someone to put on something, what the process is that they are supposed to be going on at the time, whose responsibility is to do what, when and why?
So that's a really, really good point, and that's part of the 21-point plan. What we put forward with UEFA is to ensure that there is that accountability, because if you recall, after the final, Simon, UEFA, the police were blaming Liverpool fans, UEFA were blaming Liverpool fans. Within the report, UEFA blamed the French police. So at the end of the day, for me, the accountability of putting a major final on in that city lies with UEFA.
Oh, I understand that, but do you understand the current... I understand who's responsible ultimately, in the same way that if something happens in this country, the Prime Minister's responsible. But what I'm suggesting to you is, do you understand the process of what UEFA currently do? Because I understand it. I understand that there's not enough resource within UEFA because they outsource these particular events to people that bid and put themselves forward to be able to host and provide the environment. And you would have thought that people like the Stade de France that have done these events as a matter of course, that are still having the same challenges at a different level in the Rugby World Cup, would have been able to provide the prerequisite amount of event management
I get that, Simon,
UEFA wanted.
What Ian is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, that on the night, Željko Pavlica, UEFA's head of safety and security, did not live up to his job title.
But hang on, that's optics. What would you have him have done?
How's it optics?
Because
head of safety and security. He was sitting in the VIP suite.
No, hang on. I don't particularly like politicians get involved with sport for their own reasons, but let me finish my point. The optics of it are that he's in the VIP. That's the bit that we want to take away, because ultimately, what would you have had him have done? The event was being managed by the stadium managers that are there, that are failing in their duty. UEFA doesn't have enough resource, and they are weak in their event management. So we all accept that. But what would you have this guy done?
Get out the VIP suite and start acting like the head of safety and security.
And done what?
Absolutely.
Start coordinating some safety and security around a shambles outside the event.
By doing what? Just so I'm clear, by doing
what he's paid for.
Okay, Ian, tell me what that is then. You've got something that's gone out of control. You've got the people that are not managing it properly. You've got the police that are not behaving properly. You've got one individual. What would you have him do?
Well, presumably he has a level of expertise in that he is UEFA's head of safety and security. Start acting like it.
But at that time, I'm not giving excuses to him. I'm not suggesting this is right. What I'm saying is what would you have him do at that? The event's gone. The planning, the whole situation's out of control.
Yeah.
One man being there is going to make bugger all difference. The bottom line is the planning for it should have been there in the first place.
Ian, would you not have started coordinating some kind of tidy up of the whole damn mess?
Yeah. Well, hang on, let me come in on this, because if you look at the evidence, what Con's report said, some of his team didn't even turn up for the pre-briefings, so he didn't do his job from the get-go, Sam.
Agreed. I agree with that.
The whole point of this is he shouldn't have been in the position as head and safety of UEFA with 100,000 supporters under his jurisdiction, and his job is to keep them safe. He's sitting in a VIP box. His own evidence till 8:45 when he should have been outside, because them scenes were taking place from 5:30.
But they delegated, Ian. That's my point. My point is UEFA. My point is UEFA delegates. UEFA delegates. What they do is they go to the event management business and say to them, which is in this instance...
Yeah, but Simon, somebody's in charge. And the head of safety and security is Pavlika. So he's in charge because Ceferin put him there.
I agree. It's like suggesting, OK, by that logic, Sadiq Khan should be drop-kicked out of London because of the policing situation around the European Championships. But it doesn't happen that way.
But that's why Sadiq Khan is under pressure this morning, as you and I both know. Ian, I think you would go as far as to say is there's cronyism here, because Ceferin and Pavlika are very tight. They're good mates. But are you suggesting that Ceferin is protecting Pavlika and Pavlika's position?
So, yeah, that's absolutely it. But I think there's a bigger fundamental point here. The Football Association, along with other football associations across Europe, make up UEFA. It's a confederation of football associations. So what we're saying is those usually powerful voices should be reforming UEFA from within. We've got the 21-point plan, but they should be doing far more to call out failings. Now, Ceferin failed. He failed the Liverpool and Real Madrid supporters. The Manchester City supporters had a terrible time in Istanbul when the same man was still in charge of safety, even after the debacle of Paris in 22.
He presided over a series of shambles.
Accountability, Jim. Accountability. And our Football Association has got a huge part to play in driving that accountability. And I've asked them to do it.
We've had a statement this morning, Ian, just before we came on air. Got this at 10 to 10 from the FA. We made it very clear that we support the recommendations of the independent report into the treatment of Liverpool and Real Madrid fans at the Champions League final in Paris 2022, and that what happened in Paris must never happen again. Now, that's fine. But what you're saying is, all right, that's one thing, but we want heads to roll. If not Ceferin, certainly Pavlika.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to pick up on a point, Simon, about the Hillsborough playbook. We now know that the policing around the whole last year's European Cup final was actually based on what they thought they were going to expect because of the Hillsborough lies and smears. So that's how the police's mindset was based. So all what I'm talking about from a Hillsborough playbook...
I don't know about that, Ian. And if you do, then I'll have to bow to your knowledge. I would suspect that we as British fans...
It's in the report.
Well, OK, so Ian, as I just said, Ian, I'll have to bow to your knowledge. I would also suspect that when it comes to policing of English fans, whether it be Liverpool fans, whether it be Manchester United fans, whichever club it is, English football has earned its reputation to some extent because of some of the behaviour of our fans. So I imagine that the pricing in of how people behave towards our fans is as a result of our own behaviour. But the point that I've tried to make is not to condone UEFA. UEFA's attitude towards events is clearly not good enough. They're delegating to the wrong people. But ultimately, on the event, once that event has been delegated to, you would expect those that have put money or put bids up to be able to host these events that have illustrated in the past that they're capable of doing it, that they would have the prerequisite wherewithal to be able to manage them. And whilst I agree in principle that ultimately people should be accountable for it, to suggest that someone at 5 o'clock in the afternoon is now going to get in front of something and make any difference is probably more about optics. And I understand why you're doing it, but the reality of it, having run football clubs and seen events get out of hand, I know that once they're out of hand, you're not getting them back.
Okay, Ian Byrne, Labour MP for Liverpool and West Derby, thank you very much indeed. Jimmy's a Liverpool fan. This problem was happening hours before kick-off. They had hours to coordinate a solution to the problem, and they didn't do it.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.